Hey everyone, welcome back to Case 0360. I'm your host, Masha. And if you are new here, first of all, welcome. You found the right place. And second of all, buckle up because we do not do easy stories on this channel. We go deep, we go dark. We follow the evidence, we follow the psychology, we follow the trail that leads from the very first warning sign all the way to the moment everything fell apart. And today's story is one that genuinely made me stop and sit with it for a long time before I felt ready to tell it. Because this one is not just about a crime. This one is about a progression. A slow, terrifying escalation from something that most people would dismiss as disturbing but not dangerous. All the way to murder. Multiple murders. Committed by a man who should have been stopped years before he ever laid a hand on a human being. Today, we are talking about Luka Magnotta, the cat killer who became a human killer, the man who live-streamed his own crime to the internet and then vanished into thin air while the entire world watched. This is one of the most chilling true crime cases of the last 2 decades, and I want to make sure we do it justice. So we are going to go from the very beginning, from who Luka Magnotta was before the world knew his name, all the way through to what happened and where things stand today. So get comfortable, because we are going in. Let's start with the man himself. Luka Magnotta was born Eric Clinton Kirk Newman on July 24, 1982, in Scarborough, Ontario, Canada. He grew up in a difficult environment. His parents divorced when he was young, his father was largely absent from his life, and he grew up primarily with his mother and siblings under circumstances that were by multiple accounts unstable and emotionally turbulent. From an early age, Magnotta showed signs of what clinicians would later describe as a deeply fractured sense of identity. He craved attention in a way that went beyond normal human desire for recognition. He needed to be seen. He needed to be known. And when the real world didn't give him the kind of attention he was looking for, he started constructing one. As a teenager and young adult, he began creating false identities online. Multiple personas, multiple fake profiles, multiple versions of himself that he would push out into the internet to generate buzz, to get people talking about him, to make himself feel significant. He worked briefly as a male escort, he attempted a minor modeling career, and throughout all of it there was this constant thread of someone who could not reconcile who he actually was with who he desperately wanted to be. Mental health professionals who later evaluated him identified signs of serious personality disorder. But at this point in his life, nobody was paying close enough attention to connect the dots. And then came the cats. In 2010, videos began circulating online that were so disturbing that they triggered an immediate international reaction from animal rights organizations, internet communities, and eventually law enforcement. The videos showed a young man, his face not always clearly visible, killing cats in graphic and deliberate ways, suffocating them in plastic bags, feeding live kittens to a python. The videos were not accidental. They were staged. They were filmed with a level of deliberateness that made it very clear the person making them wanted an audience. He wanted people to watch. He wanted the reaction. And he got it. Online communities mobilized almost immediately. Groups dedicated to identifying the cat killer started cross-referencing details from the videos, backgrounds, objects in the room, audio clues, trying to figure out who this person was. And through that collective investigative effort, the name Luka Magnotta started surfacing. People connected him to the videos. Screenshots were matched to his known online profiles. Accusations spread across forums and animal rights platforms pointing directly at him. And here is where the story takes a turn that should have changed everything but didn't. Law enforcement in Canada was notified. Multiple reports were filed. People were actively providing evidence linking Magnotta to these videos and saying explicitly, "This man is escalating, this man is dangerous, this man needs to be stopped before he moves from animals to people." And the response from authorities was inadequate. The investigation did not move fast enough. The warnings were not taken seriously enough. And Luka Magnotta remained free. I want to pause here because I think this part of the story is critically important and it doesn't get talked about enough. The link between animal cruelty and escalating violence toward humans is not a theory. It is documented. It is studied. Criminologists and forensic psychologists have written extensively about the fact that a significant number of violent offenders, particularly those who commit violent crimes against people, have histories of animal abuse. It is one of the recognized early warning signs. And when multiple people, ordinary citizens with no law enforcement background, were able to look at these videos and say, "This person is going to hurt a human being," and they were right. That is a systemic failure that we need to acknowledge and learn from. But we move forward because the story does not stop there. By 2012, Luka Magnotta had been identified publicly in connection with the cat videos, but had not been charged. He was living in Montreal at this point, continuing to exist in this strange online space he had created for himself, posting photos, maintaining personas, feeding the attention machine that had become the center of his existence. And then, on May 24, 2012, something happened that shocked the world in a way that even the most prepared true crime community was not ready for. A video appeared online, and unlike the cat videos, this was not about animals. The video showed the murder of a young man named Jun Lin, a 23-year-old international student from China who was studying at Concordia University in Montreal. What Magnotta did to Jun Lin in that video, and I am going to be honest with you, I am not going to describe it in graphic detail because I don't believe that serves any purpose, and I don't think that's what this story needs. But what he did was horrific. It was premeditated. It was filmed deliberately, again for an audience, again for the reaction, again for the attention. He then dismembered the body, mailed body parts to political party offices and to elementary schools in Canada, and then he ran. He actually ran. He left the country, and what followed was one of the most extraordinary international manhunts in recent memory. Interpol got involved. Law enforcement agencies across multiple countries coordinated. His face was everywhere. News broadcasts, online, wanted posters, social media. The entire world was looking for Luka Magnotta, and he managed to stay hidden for almost 2 weeks. He traveled from Canada to France, then to Germany, moving across Europe while the search intensified. There was something almost surreal about it. This man who had spent years desperate for attention, who had done everything in his power to make the world notice him, was now the most wanted person in the international news cycle, hiding in plain sight. He was ultimately found on June 4, 2012, in Berlin, Germany. He was sitting in an internet cafe, reading news articles about himself. Think about that for a moment. On the run from an international manhunt, wanted for murder in multiple countries, and he was in an internet cafe in Berlin reading about Luka Magnotta. The attention was the thing that never left him, even at the end, even when it meant his capture. A member of the public recognized him, contacted police, and he was arrested without incident. He was extradited back to Canada to face justice. The trial began in 2014, and it became one of the most watched criminal proceedings in Canadian history. The defense strategy was to argue not criminally responsible by reason of mental disorder, essentially claiming that Magnotta suffered from serious mental illness, including schizophrenia, and that he did not understand the nature or consequences of his actions at the time of the killing. The prosecution pushed back hard, arguing that the level of planning involved, the preparation of the video, the deliberate mailing of body parts, the act of fleeing the country immediately afterward, demonstrated that Magnotta knew exactly what he was doing and understood that what he was doing was wrong. The jury deliberated for several days, and in December 2014, they returned a verdict: guilty of first-degree murder, guilty on all charges. Luka Magnotta was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole for 25 years. He is currently serving that sentence in a Canadian federal institution. Now, I want to talk about Jun Lin because I think in stories like this, in the media coverage, in the true crime space generally, the victim can sometimes get lost behind the spectacle of the criminal. And Jun Lin deserves better than that. He was 23 years old. He came to Canada from China to study, to build a future, to experience life in a new country. He was someone's son. He was someone's friend. He had a whole life ahead of him that was stolen from him in the most brutal, most violating way imaginable. His family in China found out about what happened to their son through news coverage of the crime. Let that land for a second. His parents found out through the news. The grief of that family, the trauma they carry, that is the real consequence of what Luka Magnotta did. Not the infamy, not the Netflix documentary, not the true crime discussions. The destroyed life of Jun Lin and the permanent wound left in his family. There is also a broader conversation to be had about the internet's role in this case that I find genuinely complicated, and I want to be honest about that complexity. On one hand, it was internet communities, dedicated, passionate, often anonymous people working together online, who first identified Magnotta as the cat killer and tried to alert authorities. The collective investigation that those communities ran was impressive, and it was right. They correctly identified him and they correctly predicted escalation. That's worth acknowledging. On the other hand, Magnotta was fundamentally motivated by internet attention. The cat videos were made for the internet. The murder video was made for the internet. He fed off the reaction and the notoriety in a way that makes you ask uncomfortable questions about what that kind of attention, even negative, even horrified attention, does for someone with his psychological profile. Does it encourage? Does it enable? These are not comfortable questions, but they are real ones. The Netflix documentary about this case, Don't Fuck with Cats, brought the story to an enormous new audience in 2019 and reignited all of these conversations. And one of the most interesting debates that came out of that documentary was whether the online community that tracked Magnotta deserved credit for their investigative work or whether their obsessive focus on him gave him exactly the kind of fame he was chasing and potentially emboldened him rather than deterring him. I don't think there's a clean answer to that. I think both things can be true simultaneously. The people who tried to catch him were doing what they genuinely believed was the right thing. And the dynamic of internet attention around disturbed individuals is still something that psychologists and criminologists are trying to fully understand. What I do know, and what I want to leave you with today, is the lesson that this case screams from beginning to end. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When warning signs are documented, when evidence is presented, when ordinary people look at a situation and say this is going to get worse, the response cannot be a slow-moving investigation that allows the escalation to happen. The cat videos were warning signs, loud, undeniable, documented warning signs, and the system failed to act on them in time to save Jun Lin's life. That failure has to be part of how we tell this story, because if we only focus on the horror and the spectacle, we miss the lesson, and the lesson is the whole point. Luka Magnotta wanted to be famous. He wanted the world to know his name, and in a tragic, twisted way, he got what he wanted. But the name that should echo in these stories, the name that deserves to be remembered, is Jun Lin, a 23-year-old student from China who deserved a long and full life. Remember his name. All right, everyone. That is our story for today on Case 0360. I'm Masha, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching and for taking the time to engage with stories that are difficult and heavy and important. If this video moved you, if it made you think, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new case, and share this with someone who you think needs to hear it. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think about the systemic failures in this case. Should law enforcement have acted sooner on the cat killer reports? I want to know your thoughts. Stay safe, stay curious, and I will see you on the next case. This is Case 0360.